Hello, it's Andy Chadwick from Keyword Insights, and in this video we're going to go through what a keyword cluster is and what keyword clustering is. So what is a cluster? Well, a cluster is where a group of similar keywords have been grouped together to form a page of content. So each one of these symbols is a slightly different keyword that all means the same thing, and they've been clustered together and they can all be targeted on the same page. So this might be cats toys, and this might be toys for cats. So different keywords, but they've been grouped together into a cluster, and that forms this page of content. So very simply put, a cluster is a group of similar keywords that have been grouped together and can be targeted on the same page. So keyword groups, keyword clusters means the same thing. What is keyword clustering? Well, if a keyword cluster is a group of keywords being grouped together, then keyword clustering is the verb of that. So it's the actual process of grouping keywords together that mean the same thing. Traditionally, this was done quite manually using spreadsheets. Then it evolved and it used something called natural language processing. And natural language processing, as we'll see in a second, is where an algorithm or a large language model or something similar groups keywords together based on how similar it thinks they are. And we'll show you some pros and cons of that shortly. But yeah, that's sort of the evolution. It started off very manual. People used to do it on spreadsheets by using filters. Then it progressed to NLP and maybe large language models. And now we've got SERP-based clustering as well, search engine result-based clustering, which we'll go through very shortly. But as we've maybe said in a previous video, the big advantage of keyword clustering or a core, but as we've said in a previous video, the big advantage of keyword clustering is that it turns large unorganized keyword lists into something more manageable. So imagine if you've gone away and done a huge keyword research, you've got 100, 200,000 keywords. I mean, even 1,000 keywords is quite unmanageable, and it looks like this. Clustering then groups them together into the pages that actually need to be created. So you can see here, under casing a house, there's maybe 15 keywords. All that means something similar that could be grouped on that same page. So casing a house, casing houses, what does casing a house mean? What is casing a house? How to tell if someone's casing a house? So all of these can be grouped together and targeted on this page of content. As I just alluded to, there are two methods of keyword clustering, two common methods. Well, there's three if you include the manual method, but we will ignore that for now. So there's SERP-based clustering. SERP stands for search engine result page clustering. And there's semantic or NLP clustering. NLP stands for natural language processing clustering. Now, SERP-based clustering is, as the name suggests, we analyze the search engines for each keyword and see how a search engine would group them together. And how that works is we look at all the URLs they have in common out of the top 10 results, and we group them together if they've got X amount of URLs in common. So, and normally you can set what that X is. So a good rule of thumb is if a keyword has at least 4 URLs in common, if it has at least 4 URLs in common with another keyword, then they could be grouped together because the 4 out of the top 10 results are the same. So if you've got 10 keywords and across all the 10 keywords they share the same 4 URLs, they can be grouped. So in this example here, what you could see is houses for sale California, homes for sale California, and properties for sale California. Out of the 10 results, these lines are showing all the URLs they have in common. I haven't got the percentage here, but I think it's about 80%, which is obviously a lot more than 4 URLs in common. So the fact that each one of these keywords shares at least 80% URLs in common, basically the search engine pages look 80% similar for each of them, means that they can be grouped together, and should be, because that's what Google's doing, right? They're grouping them together. Now, semantic or NLP clustering, natural language processing clustering, is where an algorithm or a large language model is grouping keywords together based on what it thinks is similar. So it could group all these three together, but it could group, it might think that properties is slightly different to houses. It might mean it means a different thing, so it might break it up. But it really depends on the language model you're using, and usually the settings you apply is in how closely you want them to be clustered. So that's the other method. Now, there are pros and cons to each. Natural language processing, semantic clustering, a big pro is it's usually cheap or free. There's so many free scripts online that you can run in Python, or I mean you could just use ChatGPT or any large language model or any NLP program to basically group keywords together based on word similarity. A big con is that we operate in Google's world. well, it's Google at the moment, but we operate in Google's world. And if we are building websites to attract audiences to our business, we need to operate in Google's world. We need to optimize to what they're showing. And NLP isn't accurate for that. Because it's grouping it based on an algorithm, not what Google's doing, it might tell you incorrect or not very accurate data, which we'll show you an example of in a second. Obviously, the opposite is true for SERP-based clustering. The big pro is that we operate in Google's world, and it's much more accurate for that because it's showing us and telling us to group keywords together exactly like Google would do. A big con is that it will always cost something. To get this information, we have to scrape search engines or whichever tool has to scrape search engines. So it will always cost something. And obviously, the more keywords you put through, the more expensive that's going to be. I just wanted to show an example of what we mean by we operate in Google's world. So here's a good one. So a lot of vape websites often target vaporizer accessories and replacement parts on the same page. So the two keywords they're obviously going after here are vape accessories and vape parts. And when you Google those two keywords, actually that would make sense, by the way, sorry. That would make sense because to you and I, that keyword means the same thing, right? Vape parts, vape accessories, means the same thing. But when you Google those two keywords, you can see that the results, well, they're in two different clusters, and they're actually only 11% similarity in terms of the URLs. We have this tool within Keyword Insights called SERP similarity, and it allows you to spot check 2 to 6 keywords. And you can see here it's only 11% similar. And when we cluster loads of other similar keywords, you can see they're in two very distinct keywords. Now, an NLP program would have probably grouped vape accessories and vape parts together because to that, it would mean the same thing. Linguistically, that means the same thing. But a SERP-based clustering tool has obviously put them in two different clusters because depending on your setting, because remember, you can adjust normally what the URL, how many URLs they have in common are, but a SERP-based cluster would normally put them in two different clusters. So if we were advising for this client, Planet of the Vapes, we would tell them, hey, this page here, you want to break out into two different pages. You need a vape parts and a vape accessories page. How we make those pages different is one for another talk, another presentation, but it is to be said if they want to rank for those two keywords, and there's a lot of volume for them, like 3,600 for vape accessories and 2,400 for vape parts, they need two very distinct pages. And that's why SERP-based clustering is very, very powerful. We operate in Google's world. So just to conclude, a keyword cluster is where a cluster or a group of keywords, all similar in meaning, or basically the same in meaning, are grouped together, and that forms a page. So you'd create a web page based on a keyword cluster. Those keywords belong on that page. A separate keyword cluster, these keywords belong on that page. There are two main ways of keyword clustering. There's SERP-based clustering tools, which group keywords based on the actual search results. It looks at what the search results are doing, looks at what Google's doing, and it groups keywords based on them. And there's NLP, or natural language processing, or semantic-based clustering, where an LLM or a algorithm has decided that keywords mean the same thing, usually based on their cosine similarity, and they group them together that way.